All right. I think we can go ahead and get started now. Welcome everyone to our latest Community Tech Tuesday. This is a pretty exciting Tech Tuesday for us here on the Polarity side because obviously it's it's exciting because we get to welcome Chris Jacob from ThreatQuotient, but also because we've recently just announced that we are going to be releasing a community edition, free for your usage of Polarity. And with that, Dark Reading named us one of the hot startups to watch at Black Hat. So be sure, if you like what you see, to sign up to get onto the community edition waitlist. It's the second link on your screen, the www.dev.polarity.io/community-edition-waitlist. And if you like what you see from Chris and ThreatQuotient, you can sign up for a demo with them at https://www.threatq.com/demo. So today, again, I'm really happy to welcome my colleague and very, very good friend, Chris Jacob, the Global Vice President of Threat Intelligence Engineers from ThreatQuotient. I, of course, am Dan Ramaswamy. I run the field engineering team here at Polarity. So for those of you that are not familiar with Polarity, what we've really kind of gone after building is focused on two core tenets that our founders discovered when they were working as analysts in the CIA, and that was data awareness and data recall. And if you kind of think of all of your data being able to tell you a story, everything it wants to tell you kind of falls under those two core foundational points. And by that, I mean like data awareness, knowing what all of the tools that you have in your infrastructure know about a particular data point. And when I say a data point, you'll hear me frequently refer to it, especially when we get into the technical demo, as an entity. And what an entity is, any single data object or data point, whether that be, from a traditional security standpoint, a file hash or an IP address or an email address, or any of those individual objects or artifacts that make up usually a stack of indicators that you're going to go and research. It could also be something as simple as an email address, or I'm sorry, like an email handle, or a first name and last name that refers back to somebody that you've had contact with and you want to keep notes on them. Having that awareness and that recall of all of that data at the exact time that it's displayed on your screen, that's what Polarity was designed to do. So what we allow you to do is augment the reality of your data by annotating and connecting all the data together. So by annotating, what I mean is those entities or those objects of data, as soon as it's displayed on your screen, showing you the notes that you might have taken. So for instance, I might put for Chris Jacob, good friend, worked with for over a decade, our daughters are great friends, right? And I could have that displayed on my screen through the use of computer vision every time Chris Jacob's name popped up on my screen. Or more germane to the security discussion, if I've got an IP address that I've done a ton of research on, and I know all of the different sources of data that I've enriched it on, like VirusTotal and maybe even ThreatQuotient through curated intel, I know that I've got something of concern. I can actually have that IP address flag that it's of concern anytime it's displayed on my screen, or more importantly, having the collective memory to share that across other members of my team at any time that data is displayed on their screen as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris to tell you a little bit more about ThreatQ.
Thanks, Dan. And again, thanks to Dan and all of Polarity for having me on today. Should be a lot of fun to walk through the integration between these two platforms. I think they work really well together. We are what the industry used to refer to as a threat intelligence platform. We like to think of it more as threat operations. And it's really a intelligence-centric threat operation platform. And we start with just bringing in this massive amount of data that people are subscribing to, whether that be very expensive feeds from threat data providers to open source feeds to government, Styx taxi specific feeds. Lots and lots of data coming in. As I try to say in every presentation I do, you don't buy threat intelligence, you buy threat data. You have to manipulate that data to make it more contextual to your enterprise and to what you're trying to protect. And our goal is to help do that. And so bringing in all these different feeds, deduplicating and normalizing that data and putting it into what we call the threat library that we'll take a look at here in a little bit. And then giving the analyst a workbench to continue to manipulate that data, contextualize that data, do enrichment against some of the data sources that Dan had mentioned, virus total, et cetera, and just really building out that data set, turning it into usable intel, and then applying a customer configurable scoring algorithm that scores all that data in real time and helps make decisions about what tools to push that data to. And that kind of brings us to the last part, the integrations. And really, this is the bread and butter of our platform. It's the ability to keep the users of other tools in their tools and allow the intelligence curators, the analysts that are using our tool, to work within our tool and publish that out to all those other teams. And then, just as importantly, have the results of the work that those other teams do, feed back into our system. And it creates this feedback loop that allows us to take that scoring algorithm and make it work even better, what I call compound scoring. It allows you to take, if you think of all your security tools as a funnel with things like SIMs being at the top that can handle very large amounts of data without any issue, and then things like inline devices at the bottom, which have a finite amount of memory and can't handle very large amounts of data, rules, whatever you're telling it to do. And the scoring algorithm allows you to push that intel through that funnel, starting by casting a wide net at the top with the SIMs, and then refining that data through those feedback loops with the different tools and different teams, and eventually really zeroing in on that finished intel. So anyway, you know, slides are great and all, but I think probably a demo is the best way to go here. So let me jump into our platform, and I'll do a short, condensed kind of demo. And as Dan mentioned at the top of the meeting here, if you're interested in finding out more, go to our website /demo, and we can get you set up with a more in-depth demo. So we start here on these landing pages, and actually I'm going to jump over to this sample dashboard that we set up for this demonstration. These dashboards are built really kind of an ingenious approach in that I'll show you how we do searching in the threat library. And as you build out these searches, maybe for specific threat actors or indicators above a certain score, keywords in reports that you've ingested, as you build out all of those searches, you can save them and then use them to drive the data that's displayed on the dashboard. And I really like this approach because, you know, a lot of times dashboards get to be just kind of eye candy and they're not really that useful. This allows you to show the data that you as an analyst want to see each time. If you save these searches and go run them all the time, that's a good starting point with the data. And so being able to customize that, I think adds a lot of power to the system. So from here, we've got all of our incoming intelligence. What I'm really focused on here are these recent Splunk sightings. And I can drill down onto any of these tiles, and you can see we jump into the threat library that I talked about. And I have a very simple save search that drives that particular widget. Any Splunk events over the last 5 days. Down the left-hand side, though, you can see all the other objects that are available out of the box in the ThreatQ platform. They roughly resemble the STIX 2.0, 2.x data set. But what's important to point out is that you are not tied to this particular data model. We have what we call custom objects that allow you to define additional objects and how they relate to other objects. And they are full-fledged objects in the system. They can have subtypes, they're indexed for fast searching, and they can be related to other types of objects. and they're also usable in the investigations that we'll show you in a little while. So right now we're drilled down to this search constraint, so we only have 2 events. But if we cleared these out, we would open up this whole threat library. So we've put together, if I jump back over to our dashboard, we've put together a couple of key indicators that we're going to use to demonstrate the integration back and forth. And the one is this IP address. If we drill down on this guy, we can start to see how the details pages look in within the ThreatQ system. So they're all very consistent regardless of the object type. In this case, the object is an indicator with an IP address as a subtype. And I've got all of the attributes and attributes by source. So right now, BlueLive is what we're using as a feed here. It's the only one that's provided any attributes, but if this was also seen in other feeds, it's what I mean by deduplicate. Instead of having this IP address represented twice from two different vendors, we flatten that data model, represent it once, but then show you the sources of that object. And these pages are laid out very consistently. So if you're in other object types, they end up looking the same. As I scroll down through the screen, I get into related objects. So this is what else is this particular indicator related to? And again, it's that we've got that Splunk sighting. And then if I scroll all the way down, I get to my operations. So this is a way where I can quickly enrich data within the system instead of having 12 tabs open and copying and pasting into different data enrichment sources. I can just create these operations and go ahead and return any results from these different vendors. Great. So the story we're telling here with this particular integration, or sorry, this particular demonstration, is starting with this Splunk sighting. So again, we're now in a Splunk sighting object type. Again, consistent layout. Splunk is matched. We see the related indicators. And interestingly, if I jump back over to this indicator here, let's actually open it up full screen so we can see. So you can see that this indicator is scored as very high. And so this is why it ultimately was pushed over to Splunk to kind of begin this whole story. It's my scoring algorithm as it applies to this particular IP address is such that it's got an a adversary associated with it. So I have a wildcard adversary rule that says if there's any attribution, push the score up. Before it was sent to Splunk, it was seen by a specific feed that I have a lot of faith in. So I've got that as adding weight to it. And then finally, it's got an attribute that says that it's part of a command and control. So those 3 things promoted this, kind of found that particular needle in the haystack and told me to push this over to Splunk. So, if I have 9 million indicators in my ThreatQ platform, I'm using this intelligence scoring to whittle that down to some subset, maybe 9,000, maybe 90,000, but a much lesser amount of data. And I'm pushing that over to my SIM, in this case, Splunk. Now, what's cool here is that Splunk has matched on that and sent an event back to me in the form of what we call a sighting. And what that illustrates is actually the compound scoring. So you can see where I now see this from 2 different sources, one from BlueLive and then again from Splunk. So Splunk being an internal tool, now that I've confirmed a sighting of this on an internal tool, I want to crank that score way up. So it might have been a 5 or a 6 to send it over to Splunk. But once it's been confirmed as existing on my network, I'm going to push that score up, because now I do want to, do things like push IPS rules out, maybe start some thread hunts, that sort of thing. And that scoring is set up very easily. If we go into data management here, I'll just show you this real quick. So as I said, you can score based on sources, any attributes that are assigned to it. So we had that C2 attribute, right? We pump that one up. And then finally, any adversary relationships. Okay. So again, if we start back at the beginning and now let's jump into the investigation because I think that's a good transition over to what Dan's going to show. So this is a completed investigation, well, an ongoing investigation, but there's already data on it. And I just did that to save some time for the purpose of demonstration here. But you can see it starts with a Splunk sighting. So let me talk about what we're trying to accomplish here, right? One of the things that we strive to do here at ThreatQ, again, is let the security folks use their security tools, not have to pivot back and forth into an intelligence platform. We want to provide those integrations and push that data out. But from time to time, when something has happened, those different teams need a place that they can come together and collaborate. And so that's the purpose behind TQI. It's a digital evidence board. So I like to think of it as, you know, the old cop shows where they have the cork board up at the end of the squad bay and all the pictures on it with twine connecting them and how things are laid out. And that's sort of the same thing that we have here. You can see that we've got two participants. In this case, Dan and myself are both participating in this particular integration, but that list could go, you know, 5, 10, 20, however many people are participating in the investigation. And it starts with that Splunk sighting that we talked about. And you'll notice we're going to view the same data that we were just going over in the more tabular details page format. This just lays it out and allows us to see the relationships in a collaborative way. So starting with that Splunk sighting matched on this particular URL, right? So club2crd.cc/index.php, which is a real site and looks pretty nasty. So I would avoid that. But here's where we first start to understand those relationships. So, you know, immediately I could see that it's related to this IP address that we had talked about, and I can send a task out to go ahead and have that IP address blocked. So that's some sort of low-hanging fruit stuff I can do right away. I know it's nefarious. Let's just, you know, block access to it. But I can further understand relationships here and say, okay, this index.php is related to this specific CDE. So now I can start to get into what exactly were these attackers after? What was downloaded from this site? And I can further see there that it is that I've got this file hash here that was actually what was delivered. Now this is where I mentioned operations before, and I can run those same things here. This is where I could have an operation to submit this particular file or this sample to a sandbox and let the sandbox do its dynamic analysis, return that information again through that feedback loop, and better understand you know, what this malicious file was doing. In this particular case, however, I understand that it's related to this tool, Cobalt Strike, and then Cobalt Strike is further being deployed by Cobalt Spider. So I understand, I've kind of followed that chain all the way down to the actual adversary. And so knowing who the adversary is at this point, and this is why, you know, I know a lot of people are saying things can't be indicator centric, but the fact of the matter is tools speak indicators. It's taking all of those different bits of information from the different tools, putting it together and being able to step back and see that bigger picture. And in this case, ultimately arriving at the fact that this is potentially Cobalt Spider who's behind this. And so now what do we do? And through ThreatQ's integration with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you know, that's relatively straightforward. We understand the attack patterns that Cobalt Spider is associated with, and from there further understand the courses of action that MITRE recommends in dealing with it. So I can go out and actually task people to go do these things as well. At the same time, because we want to understand the relationship across all these data sets, I've got both a snort rule here that I can, again, I've tasked Dan here with going in, deploying that on our IPS systems. And then here I've got a Yara rule. And this, again, understanding this relationship is helpful in bringing in this collaborative effort, because now my threat hunt team can participate in this as well. And I can say, hey, here's a Yara rule to get you started down the path of actually going out and hunting for additional existence of this adversary or this APT on our network. So again, super condensed demo, but I don't want to take up all the time. I want to make sure that Dan's got enough time to demo his platform, and then of course come back together here at the end for hopefully some good questions and answers. So Dan, back over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. So with that, I'm going to spend a few minutes and really kind of talk about what Chris just showed on that kind of twine board in the investigations. All of that data has to be produced. So I'm going to kind of walk through how we would go about producing that data and how Polarity can really assist and provide kind of that superhuman capability to the analysts, where they don't have to know everything. They just have to know the right things, right? So, so as Chris mentioned, this all starts with some curated intel. So we've got this IP address that obviously we've seen somewhere in Splunk. We could build, you know, a Splunk query to go search for this IP address, or we could, you know, go look for it through all of the tools that we have. But to go from interface to interface to interface, just like Chris said, that takes too long. So we took feedback from the community, and what we built was a way to search for entities through Polarity right within the overlay screen. Now I'm running Polarity just in on-demand only mode. Very quickly, I can show you, here's all the integrations that I've got enabled. It's pretty lean, but I am talking to my Splunk Enterprise server. I am talking to my Phantom instance. I am talking to ThreatQ. I'm using URL House and a couple other integrations just to show you what I'm working with. And I can toggle those on and off very, very easily from right within this overlay screen. But what I want to do first is, we talked about the single pivot point of this IP address. So this is the entity or the object that we want to start from, right? So as Chris mentioned, there's a sighting in Splunk. So if I just go and quick look for it, I can see very rapidly all of the return from the tools that I have in my tool stack. And what this is giving me is that full data awareness immediately on this particular entity or this particular object. So if I expand this out, I can see everything that I know about it from a threat quotient standpoint. I can see that there's some details here. I can actually add a tag and say current investigation. So this goes right back into the threat quotient platform, and it'll be tagged right on that entity within threat quotient. But more importantly, I can actually come over here and I can create an annotation on this IP address, which what I mean by that is, again, when I mentioned earlier, an annotation is simply anything that I want to display on my screen or anyone else on my team's screen whenever this particular IP address is displayed. So if I want to say current investigation, potential APT, current, or you know, it really doesn't matter. It's whatever notes that we want to have displayed. As soon as I create these annotations, they now go into these channels, so that as soon as it's displayed on anybody else's screen, it will display that relevant information. So I'm going to quick shift over to highlight mode just to show you the different way that we can display visual representation from that computer vision. So when I go over here to my to my Splunk log, I'm just going to pull a snippet that I already pulled out just because I like to cheat instead of having to build Splunk query language. And as you can see, computer vision has immediately highlighted that IP address that I made that annotation on, and it's built this kind of color candy cane. And what that color candy cane represents is the colorization that I gave the annotation itself, the colorization that I've assigned to each one of the tools themselves, to represent visually to me what's going on with this particular entity on my screen. So as an analyst right now, I know with that like bright colorization, I know immediately that I'm dealing with something that is been curated in our threat intel platform. It's something that I've got a Splunk hit on in my Splunk log. It's also something that somebody on the team has made a note on. And as you can see here, right over here, these are those annotations that I just made. Let's say I'm working with somebody else. I'm working with Chris. I want to make a comment to Chris. I could say, hey, Chris. Whoop, if I can ever type in front of people, which I just can't seem to do, let me know if you see this IP as well. Right, so I can actually just send that comment right there. Every time it's displayed on anybody's screen, they're going to see that comment. So another thing to talk about is Chris had mentioned that there's outcomes that need to come from this, right? So I've got immediately at my fingertips, I see that I've got this IP address that we've just established is bad. So what I want to do now is I actually want to go and run a Phantom playbook against it. I can. Unfortunately, I've broken my Phantom instance now, so I'm not going to show you that. But the point being that you can actually pivot out to that corrective action immediately. Now, one of the other things that we talked about was all of the other data points that come with this particular hit. So if I go back to my Splunk instance here, so you can see here's my Splunk Enterprise. I can see what Splunk displays. I can see that I've got this one exchange where, okay, we've got a file hash that came out. Looks like there's been a file download and it came from this particular IP address. I can just grab this and with just a quick keystroke, I can look up that particular URL and get a representation of what I know about it. So I've got a screenshot here so I can see immediately, well, it doesn't really look like it's serving malware, but it does look like it's serving credit card numbers and CVV values. So I probably would want to block that URL. And the important part about that is that now I would kind of probably go back to my notes and my comments here, my annotations as well, and start having my team consider the fact that we could be looking at a potential insider issue just because of what I'm seeing with this result of this URL being rendered and displayed right here in my overlay card. So with that, I've kind of walked pretty quickly through all of the different data points and the way we provide the data awareness and the data recall that kind of provides all of those individual points within the investigation that Chris walked through. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude my portion of the demo and open it up for questions. So if you'll open up your Q&A panel, if you happen to have any questions, just feel free to fire away. And with that, I will get back into the presentation, make sure I stay on track because I can't ever remember what I'm doing. All right, so here we are at Q&A. Getting a few questions in the panel here. First question, Chris, this one's for me, is when is the community edition being released? Fantastic question. Unfortunately, attorneys won't allow me to put a date on it, but rest assured it is very short on the horizon. So stay tuned and be sure if it is something that you're interested in, sign up for the waitlist at the www.polarity.io/community-edition-waitlist. So you can get your name on that list for that. What other use cases are there for the ThreatQ integration? Chris, I think we can answer that one together. I'm just going to oversimplify it and say that if there is ever a need to pivot on curated intelligence data that you've worked on, contextualizing and getting all of your relevance on, any of those use cases are going to be germane. So if you ever have to look up, like for instance, in the last Community Tech Tuesday, we did a phishing investigation and we had a bunch of different indicators that we had to go and seek truth on, whether they were bad or unknown or what the actual truth level was on them. That would be an ideal usage for a threat intel platform like ThreatQ. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I think that, the best way to put it is that ThreatQ becomes your single source of truth, right? And again, while it might be the analysts that are in there with their hands, in the data, working on the analyst workbench, Polarity brings that data to all the other users across the company. So no matter the use case, if you're reading a blog by one of the research teams out there, and you have a file hash listed in that blog that TQ knows about, that information is instantly available to the reader of that blog. So the use cases really become endless when you combine how Polarity makes access to that information so available, and how TQ stores up and allows you to really curate that threat intelligence.
Great. Next question is kind of for both of us as well, but I'll take a stab at it first, then you can. Is the ThreatQ integration going to be on the Community Edition? Well, it's not natively going to be on the Community Edition, just because we don't actually natively ship with integrations enabled, but we do have a GitHub repository where we've got over 115 integrations freely available, freely distributed, and you will be able to take advantage of those integrations with Community Edition.
Yeah, and absolutely on our side, there are no limitations. So once you guys get that up and running, you can just configure it to your ThreatQ instance. And if you run into any problems there, you can reach out to us and we'd be happy to help.
Great question for you, Chris. How is ThreatQ deployed, on-prem or in the cloud?
Yeah, so the short answer is dealer's choice. One of the fundamental principles that we built ThreatQ with is that your data should be your own data. And so to that end, it is a single tenant type environment, and it can be deployed anywhere. In the past was more traditional to deploy it on-prem. As things have changed over the years, we have had customers deploy it in their private clouds, their VPCs. And then finally, some time ago, we started offering hosting as well. So even if you're hosted in our cloud, it is a single tenant environment, meaning that your data and other customers' data is not intermingled. And we think that's super important when you're dealing with company intel.
Great. Another question for you, Chris. Where can I see the other Threat Quotient integrations available?
Yeah, thanks somebody for asking that. If you go to marketplace.threatq.com, you can see a pretty extensive list of all of our integrations. And those integrations include inbound feeds, the operations that we touched on briefly, and then integrations to third-party tools like sandboxes, SIMs, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't see something listed there, reach out. It's probably in development. Those integrations, they're constantly being updated, because again, I think that's a big part of the value that our platform brings.
Great. Just got a bit of breaking news to bring to everyone's attention. Apparently, on the opening slides, when I brought your attention to the Community Edition waitlist, I gave you the wrong link. The one that's being displayed here, however, is correct. So it was the dev-polarity. Just delete all of the dev part. So in addition to that, I just got one last question in the Q&A. Are you able to customize highlight colors on Polarity? And the answer is yes. In fact, here, let me actually escape out of this. And I will show the color chart that we've developed so far, kind of as a starting point. This is the way the colors are kind of assigned now. One of the initiatives that we have as an organization is to really work with other vendors in the security space to work on developing a standards-based approach to colorization. So that, for instance, when you've got curated intel, known bad IOCs, like in Threat Quotient, as you can see, it was colorized with that kind of bright pinkish red. It would come in as that, right? That is urgent information that's known bad IOCs. So like I said, it's one of our initiatives is to work on developing those standards. I think it's something that would be very, very useful, because when you adhere to these types of standards and you kind of unify across all platforms, it makes it that much easier for the operators. And let's face it, like, the bad guys work together. Why can't the good guys? Looks like I got to all the questions. Well, with that, then I'll just take another quick second and thank Chris Jacob and the ThreatQ team. Certainly appreciate having you join us this week. Look forward to working with you again in the future, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And yeah, we can hopefully have opportunity to work together quite a bit moving forward.
Awesome. And with that, again, get signed up for the Community Edition waitlist or for the ThreatQ demo. I hope everybody has a great couple of weeks. We'll see you at the next Community Tech Tuesday.